Welcome to Shadowproof. Evidence first, noise last.
Commercial aircraft emergency transmitters are designed to activate automatically upon impact, broadcasting a distress signal on dedicated aviation frequencies. However, physical damage from a crash can compromise these systems, severing antenna connections or damaging internal circuitry. This creates a critical gap. Having survival equipment is not the same as having functional survival equipment in an emergency. In remote jungle environments, dense canopy and terrain can further attenuate any weakened signal, hindering detection by search aircraft or satellites. Standard search patterns for downed aircraft rely on these signals. Without a strong beacon, the search area expands exponentially. This scenario shifts survival from technological rescue to pure human endurance, relying on knowledge and willpower. The pilot situation exemplifies a documented pattern in survival case studies. Equipment failure often marks the transition to the most brutal phase of an ordeal. It underscores why survival training emphasizes redundancy and basic skills over total reliance on any single piece of gear. The aircraft was a single-engine model, common for private flights in remote regions. Triple-canopy jungles have 3 distinct layers of vegetation, creating a complex environment. This vegetation structure blocks most sunlight, keeping the forest floor in perpetual twilight. Constant humidity in such environments often exceeds 90%, accelerating equipment corrosion. The heat in these regions typically ranges from 85 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Uninhabited rainforests may span hundreds of square miles without human settlements. Light aircraft in such flights typically carry limited emergency supplies and communication equipment. The isolation factor means rescue operations could take days to organize and deploy. Search and rescue operations in dense jungle terrain present unique challenges. Visibility from aircraft can be near zero due to the dense vegetation blocking views of the ground. When an aircraft goes down in such environments, it can vanish completely into the green expanse below. This begins a critical race against time for any survivors. Dehydration becomes an immediate threat in tropical environments with high temperatures and humidity. Injuries sustained during a crash must be managed without immediate medical assistance. The combination of these factors creates an extreme survival scenario. Search teams must work against both the terrain and the clock to locate survivors. The pilot's survival of the initial impact was the first critical hurdle, but his injuries were significant and immediate. The aircraft's structural integrity was compromised, rendering it unsuitable as a reliable shelter from the elements or further collapse. His first actions focused on securing the emergency locator transmitter, a standard device designed to broadcast a distress signal upon activation. This device, often activated automatically by G-force sensors during a crash, is a critical piece of survival equipment in such scenarios. However, the ELT had sustained damage in the impact, potentially compromising its ability to function and transmit the vital distress signal. This presented a major complication, as a functioning ELT drastically improves the chances of a rapid search and rescue response. The pilot now faced a dual challenge: managing his injuries and determining the next steps without guaranteed electronic communication. The Emergency Locator Transmitter, or ELT, is a critical piece of survival equipment mandated on most aircraft. Its primary function is to automatically activate upon a significant impact, broadcasting a distress signal on international emergency frequencies. This signal is designed to be picked up by search and rescue satellites, providing the crucial first alert and a location for downed aircraft. However, ELT failures are a documented and recurring problem in aviation incidents. Malfunctions can occur due to physical damage from the crash itself, battery failure, or antenna separation. In this case, the device designed to be a lifeline remains silent, severing the most direct line to potential rescuers. This immediate loss of electronic signaling forces a reliance on slower, more traditional search methods. It transforms the search from a targeted rescue into a vast, time-consuming scan of possible crash sites. The survivor was left with a broken electronic device instead of a functioning emergency beacon. With knowledge of basic circuitry, they attempted to manipulate the device's internal components. This involved adjusting wiring and tapping on connections in hopes of restoring functionality. The goal was to trigger even a brief, sporadic signal that could be detected by rescuers. Such efforts required significant physical and mental energy during a survival situation. Emergency beacons typically transmit on international distress frequencies when functional. Damaged electronics can sometimes produce intermittent signals through physical manipulation. This approach demonstrates resourcefulness when standard emergency equipment fails. With no accessible clean water source, his primary survival task became water collection. He used pieces of the aircraft wreckage, like plastic or metal, to create rudimentary rainwater catchments. This method of water harvesting is common in survival situations where containers are unavailable. For food, he relied on what the jungle provided, focusing on known edible insects and larvae. These provided essential protein and moisture, crucial for maintaining energy and hydration. Insects can contain up to 80% protein by dry weight, making them efficient survival food sources. The moisture from insects helped supplement his limited water supply between rainfalls. This dual approach to resource management, water collection and insect foraging, formed his basic survival strategy. The psychological challenge was as severe as the physical one. Severe pain from injuries created a constant background of suffering. A malfunctioning rescue device added a layer of technical frustration to the ordeal. Sheer isolation meant days or weeks without human contact or communication. To combat mental deterioration, maintaining a strict routine became essential. This routine often included scheduled rest, ration checks, and signal attempts. Such structure is a documented survival technique to preserve cognitive function and hope. This structure, checking the transmitter, maintaining his shelter, searching for food, provided a necessary mental anchor to prevent despair and panic. In survival psychology, such routines combat the cognitive overload of crisis by creating predictable tasks. This mechanism is observed in various endurance scenarios, from polar expeditions to adrift sailors. Without this anchor, the mind can spiral into a debilitating cycle of fear and hopelessness. The segment titled, Limits and Misconceptions, acknowledges a critical gap in the public record. There is much we do not know. The full extent of his injuries has not been publicly detailed in medical terms. This lack of specific clinical data is common, as medical privacy laws often restrict the release of such information. Consequently, public understanding relies on general descriptions rather than precise diagnoses or trauma assessments. The Emergency Locator Transmitter, or ELT, is designed to automatically activate upon impact, broadcasting a distress signal to search and rescue satellites. Technical failures in such devices can range from antenna damage and battery depletion to internal circuit malfunctions, any of which would silence the beacon. Without the ELT's signal, search grids must rely on last known positions and drift calculations, vastly expanding the potential search area. The survivor's account, reconstructed from later debriefings, provides the primary narrative for events where no other witnesses existed. This highlights a common pattern in survival stories. The critical phase is often undocumented, known only to the individual who endured it. Contrary to dramatic portrayals, real survival rarely hinges on hunting large game or constructing complex shelters in the initial days. The immediate priorities are typically more fundamental: securing water, regulating body temperature, and preventing injury. This focus on core physiological needs is a consistent principle across different survival scenarios, from deserts to cold climates. Survival in extreme situations follows a clear hierarchy of needs, with water being the most critical priority. After securing water, protection from environmental elements becomes essential to prevent hypothermia or heat exhaustion. Only after addressing immediate physiological needs should attention turn to signaling for potential rescue. Food procurement typically comes last in this survival sequence, as humans can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. Modern technology, like emergency beacons, provides valuable assistance, but cannot guarantee rescue in all circumstances. When technological aids fail, fundamental survival knowledge and adaptability become the primary determinants of outcome. This pattern demonstrates that survival often depends on mastering basic principles, rather than relying on advanced equipment. The consistent application of these priorities forms a reliable framework for endurance in diverse extreme environments. This survival event provides clear, practical lessons for aviation and outdoor preparedness. First, it underscores the critical importance of carrying redundant signaling devices. A personal locator beacon, or PLB, should be carried in addition to an aircraft standard ELT. This redundancy creates a backup system, dramatically increasing the chances of a successful rescue. Second, the event highlights that technical knowledge can be as vital as a physical tool. In this case, an understanding of basic electronics allowed the survivor to attempt to repurpose a broken device. This transformed a non-functional piece of equipment into a potential, though unreliable, asset. The core lesson is that preparedness combines both reliable gear and the practical knowledge to use or adapt it. This incident illustrates the survival hierarchy, a systematic approach used in emergency situations. The pilot's actions followed the core rule of survival: address life-threatening issues in strict order of priority. First, he managed his injuries, as uncontrolled bleeding or trauma can become fatal within minutes. Next, he solved the water problem, since dehydration can impair cognition and become critical within days. Then he created a way to be found, as signaling increases rescue probability before resources deplete. Finally, he found calories, addressing longer-term energy needs once immediate survival was secured. This hierarchy mirrors standard survival protocols taught in aviation and wilderness training programs. The sequence demonstrates how logical prioritization can overcome overwhelming circumstances through structured action. The survivor's approach was methodical, focusing on rationing limited supplies to extend endurance. He prioritized shelter construction using available materials, understanding that exposure posed a greater immediate threat than hunger. Water collection became a daily discipline, utilizing natural condensation methods and avoiding contaminated sources. The repaired device, possibly a satellite phone or emergency beacon, required careful power conservation between activation attempts. Each decision followed a risk assessment pattern common in survival situations, evaluating energy expenditure against potential gain. The fleeting signal transmission, though brief, followed established emergency protocols that search teams are trained to recognize and trace. This endurance strategy contrasts with aggressive survival approaches, emphasizing conservation over exploration when rescue is anticipated. The search team's arrival represented the culmination of both technological systems and human survival discipline working in coordination.
If the proof convinced you, subscribe and open the next case.